I'm going to explain the township and range system and apply it to us here in Indiana. So this system, we see this colored map, the different colors showcase areas that utilize the township and range system, or the grid system. So this is something you're going to see across the country. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, is this grid pattern is used for most of the country, but in case of rivers and mountainous areas, it can be quite difficult to actually see it. But trust me, it is a method that is used, and I'll show how it's legally used at the surveyor's office. So this is a map, and we can see up here in Indiana we've got these different lines. Let's go ahead and zoom in on Indiana, and this is the original map used. And so what we have are these two, or actually three, key lines. We have this horizontal line, or this latitudinal line, and we'll call that the baseline. And so the baseline comes right through here. It's also going to be referred to as the township line, or the T line. Up here we have two of these, what they're called principal meridians, and they're actually shown on here. All these are principal meridians, and they're labeled different numbers or names. And so essentially we have over here the first principal meridian, and then over here the second principal meridian. And each of these meridians cross the baseline. Now in the case over here, it crosses in Kentucky. Kentucky does not utilize the township and range system, and so right through here is actually here in Indiana, and I'll come back to this here in a minute and zoom in here. So the principal meridians, we're also going to call them the range lines. Have you ever heard of range line? You might have heard of it as a label of a road here in the central Indiana area. So these principal meridians we're also going to call range lines, or the R line. So once again, we've got the T line and we've got these R lines. Let's take this one step further. And so now what we have is we have simply divided up Indiana into these big, huge boxes. Here's a big box, here's a big box, down there's a box, and so forth. So let's zoom into this particular point here. And we zoom into that point, we can now start to divide up the land much easier. And so we have that baseline I've mentioned beforehand. So this baseline right through here, that baseline is shown right there. That's, once again, that baseline is also known as the T line. This second principal meridian, this long line right through here, is also shown right through here. So we're just zooming into that particular area. And so let's go ahead and we can start naming off boxes, or we'll call them townships. And so we've got this particular T line or baseline. So one box, 2 boxes south of that T line is Township 2 South. Very clever. If this was right here, it'd be Township 2 North. If it was right here, it'd be Township 1 North. Township 1 South, and so on. Township 3 South. So you get the idea here. Then we also can label this Range 1 West, because it's 1 west of the range line, or the R line. And up here we've got a different location, and so a different township. And so this township is, as the name implies, T4N. That means it's 1, 2, 3, 4 north of the township line, but then also 2 east of the R line. 1, 2, range 2 east. So each of these here are now individually described 36 square mile townships. They're 6 miles by 6 miles. And so we now have divided up this huge area that is Indiana into individual townships that are 6 miles by 6 miles, and we've given them, each of them, unique identifiers or unique names. This box, there's no other box in this particular area named Township 2 South, Range 1 West. Same with this one, there's no other one, a unique identifier, there's no other one named Township 4 North, Range 2 East. Let's take it one step further. So now we're going to zoom into one of these individual 6 mile by 6 mile townships. And we do that right through here. So now we take that one township and we can divide it into 36 individual smaller land groupings or sections. And so each of these here is a section. So this is 1 mile by 1 mile. Keep in mind the township is 6 miles by 6 miles. 36 square miles. And so then how they label it, kind of confusing, but they label it by putting number 1 always in the top right-hand corner and snaking it around all the way until we get to 36. Once again, it makes sense we have 36 sections because it's 6 miles by 6 miles. 6 times 6 equals 36. So then we can take these 1 mile by 1 mile sections, and even further we can divide them up into more of a descriptive land, or descriptive land name. So now what we can say is, okay, now we start to understand why we have a big old grid pattern throughout the United States. And so we look at Iowa. Here's a map of the county maps of Iowa, or of all the counties. And you can clearly see, first off, they got way too many damn counties. But also, we can see this grid pattern. We can see the evidence of this whole township and range system. Now, there are some squiggly lines, and I'll come back and I'll explain the squiggly lines a little bit later. There's also some anomalies over here. There's a lot of rivers over here, and so there is this isn't completely a grid pattern, but you can see there's a lot of evidence of it in all these Midwestern states. Here we have Nebraska and Kansas, and you can see an aerial here. I took this, I believe, flying over the middle of nowhere, Indiana, and so you can see the grid pattern. These roads are evidence, direct evidence of the township and range system. And so even in areas where they have different agricultural types, you can still see the squares. So there's a lot of circles in here, but those circles are all inside squares, and the circles just relate to the type of agriculture, the method used, the technique used to plant in kind of hillier areas. Now let's go back to our 1 mile by 1 mile sections. So once again, we divided up the land into 1 mile by 1 mile sections, 36 sections in one township. We can go even further. So we can say these is legal descriptions. In terms of your property, it's actually in the books. Down at the courthouse, it's actually labeled like this. That's why this is somewhat relevant. So what we can do is then we have our one section. We can say, well, I live in the northeast quarter of the northwest quarter of section 23, township 6 whatever, north, range line 4 east, whatever. So essentially what we've done is we've now divided up into small little parcels that can then further be subdivided into further descriptions, and so subdivisions and so on. So once again, Marion County Surveyor. So this is just evidence that this stuff is actually, you can see it when you fly over, but you can also see it when you go to the courthouse, this ingenious township and range system. Let's also go to our good friend the internet. So here is National Geographic and USGS has now made topo maps available. So those of you who go hiking or ever do anything that are interested in topo maps, boy, the Boku amount of them are free now. That's just a beautiful thing if you like this kind of stuff. And so here we have a topo map for Greenwood, Indiana. So Center Grove High School right there, Bargersville, Bargerstucky down there. Up here is Smith Valley, and you can see how the roads kind of correspond to these sections. Here's section 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so this all here is a part of a township. Now up here is a different township. You can see this road right through here separates into a different township. We have Smith Valley. One of the things you notice is this zigzag. This zigzag here is to compensate for the curvature of Earth's surface, and so these zigzags, if you zoom in, you can see these probably a little bit easier on Google Maps, these zigzags. Now, over time, these zigzags have been smoothed, but this road, Smith Valley, right through here, used to be a very confusing four-way stop because you go here, and then you have to go here, and then go there. And so this is all just to compensate for the curvature of Earth. So Earth, contrary to Shaquille O'Neal and other famous athletes, the Earth is not flat, it's actually round. So these curvatures here are just to compensate for all these lines of longitude eventually meet in one point called the North Pole. And we zoom in, we can see grid. This is once again, all of these have been divided up into individual sections that are named. So that's the township and range system.